I'm Diane Martindale, the League of Women Voters President this year. Our league is celebrating its 20th anniversary and we're happy to have you with. That's why you all got stickered. We're still celebrating. Are there any of our founding mothers with us today so we can honor them?
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. Faithful, faithful, faithful. On Saturday, the League of Women Voters of the United States is celebrating its 95th anniversary and was founded by the same women who fought for women's suffrage. How many people here have not yet had a chance to join the League? There's membership information at the back of the room, or you can see Claire. Claire, please wave. Okay, thank you. Also, Steve Bowman has just updated the Tri-Bulletin, They Represent You, which lists all our elected officials and their contact information. There are some of those on the table, and we try to keep a supply at the elections office. The League of Women Voters does not endorse candidates or political parties, but does encourage informed and active participation in government.
I think the coffee pot's getting ready to take off.
Okay. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, influence public policy through education and advocacy, and do take stands on issues after study and consensus. I will now turn the meeting over to our program chair, Sarah Crosby, who will introduce our... You're going to be changing your mind on that, I'm sure. Sarah Crosby, who will introduce our program today and inform you about upcoming programs. Sarah.
Thank you, Diane.
Hi, everybody. Before I introduce our speaker for today, I do want to remind you that our March meeting is an update meeting. And for those of you who are not members of the League, but especially for those who are members of the League, we're going to do an update on 4 issues that we've been following over the last couple of years. Campaign finance and the Citizens United decision. We have somebody from the state office coming to give us an update on progress with this issue. Also redistricting. And Linnea Hurst, our former state president, is coming to give us an update on this. And I've asked her to try and make redistricting a sexy subject so that we will all be enthusiastic and go out and tell people why this is such an important issue in our democracy. We'll also be getting an update on the Washington Voting Rights Act, which many of you have been following and have been interested in, and also gun safety and what has been happening in our state in the aftermath of the passage of I-594 last year. Yay! And with that, we're going back to school today. Though all of us have a fundamental understanding of government and how it functions at various levels, there are a lot of specifics that can be elusive, especially in a situation like ours where we have county and town government intersecting in sometimes obscure ways. So here to help us broaden our understanding of how our own county functions and our town is Duncan Wilson, who is the Friday Harbor Town Administrator. Duncan has been a lifelong Washingtonian, born in Seattle, educated at both Western Washington University and the University of Puget Sound. For years, he was an attorney in private practice, but in 2004, he began his career in city governments, first in Covington as city attorney and deputy city manager, in North Bend as city administrator, and now here in Friday Harbor since 2012. Duncan put together his talk and has given it to the San Juan County Economic Development Commission and its invited guests. And now we get to benefit from his knowledge, and we'll be very smart about our local government. Thank you all, and welcome, Duncan.
Thanks very much. Just a couple of preambles. The first is I've had a sciatic nerve issue with my back, so if I sit down in the middle, it's not because of anything else other than the fact that I hurt. Secondly, every opinion, which I'm sure will come flying out of my mouth today, is that of mine alone and does not belong to the town of Friday Harbor, the mayor nor the council, although I would hope sometimes they agree with me, but not always, so you never really know. Back during my days, I had 24 years as an attorney. One of the more terrifying things I ever did was have to appear in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco to argue a case that I had taken through the court system up here in Washington. And one of the things you do when you prepare for a Court of Appeals argument is you stand in front of a mirror, you sit at a table, and you go over your argument and you hone it for it seems like days on end. It was hours and hours and hours of preparation. And then you stand up in front of them and you open your mouth and you say, may it please the court, and you start into your presentation, you're about 13 seconds in, and they just stop you and they just say, Mr. Wilson, can you explain please about something that's like 40 minutes back in your presentation, and you have to jump to it, and then you have to try to get back on track to where you were. So your beautifully scripted presentation to the court, which was sure to be winning, all of a sudden becomes a jumble and a mishmash of questions interjected when they want to know what it is. So I say that to tell you, jump in any time. I'm used to. I prefer to take the questions as you're thinking of them and don't feel bad about it, because usually I can get back on track, and if I can't, so what? I want to start at the 10,000 foot level, and by starting there, it's going to be something that a lot of you already know, and that is federal system. And I break it down into the three different sections of government, the executive, judicial, and legislative. And I mention that only because we start seeing the same sort of themes throughout when we get down to local government. The executive being the president, Supreme Court being the judicial, and Congress is the legislative. And then you get down to your state level, you drop down, you get to the state system, your executive is your governor, your judicial is your state Supreme Court as your top court, and your legislative is your legislature in Olympia. Then you get down to the county, and this is when all bets are off. Things begin to split up, and you never really know what you're going to get, because a lot of it is given to the authority of the local jurisdiction to determine what the structure is going to be. Usually you always will have an executive of some type. In King County, Dow Constantine is the King County executive and holds that position. Here on the island, Mike Thomas is the county manager, and he holds the executive position. And what the executive usually is the highest ranking administrative officer in the jurisdiction. And then of course your legislature here, after a restructuring, is your 3-member county council. When you get to cities and towns, there's many, many different types of cities and towns you'll find in the state of Washington. There are, they used to call them first-class cities, second-class cities, third-class cities, fourth-class cities, towns, code cities, non-charter code cities. The list goes on and on. To be a municipal attorney is to suffer a lifelong consternation in trying to keep track of what rules apply to which jurisdiction. Here, we're the town of Friday Harbor, which is the smallest of all of the different types of different jurisdictions they have in the state of Washington. We will have either a mayor or a manager, and people always ask about my position, what does it mean to be a town administrator? What it means is, when you see the administrator name, it means I've got somebody higher than me up the chain, which here is the mayor. Some cities in the state have managers, city managers instead. If you see the name manager, what it's going to mean is that they are the chief administrative officer, and there's nobody above them. Towns that formed, we'll be talking about it in a minute, but a lot of towns formed in the late 1990s. A lot of cities formed. And a lot of them, most of them were all done as manager forms of government. So when you have a manager, they usually will elect one of the council members on a rotating basis to serve as the ceremonial mayor. So if you ever go to a town, they've got a manager, don't get confused that they've got a mayor. It's usually only a ceremonial position to kiss babies, cut ribbons, and take on some of the duties you have to do on a day-to-day basis to represent the town or city as an elected official.
Duncan, the manager is always appointed, right?
The manager is always appointed. It's never an elected position.
But like the executive can be either way, because in King County, the executive is an elected position, whereas in San Juan County, it's an appointed position.
It depends on the
Yeah.
charter, and that's what I'm saying, it's always
Yeah.
different per the
Okay.
county.
But the manager's always appointed.
Yes.
Who appoints the manager if he's the top person?
He's the top administrative officer appointed by the legislative body. The legislative body has that option. For me, as administrator, I am appointed directly by the top administrative officer, which is the mayor. So in both of the places, my last two jobs, I've been an administrator, which means I serve with what they call a strong mayor. The strong mayor is one that's actually an elected mayor rather than just picked and appointed off the council. So if you ever hear the term strong mayor, it just means they were elected. For us, under any city or town system, we have the same kind of structure as well. The executive, which will be the mayor and manager. The judicial, which will be our municipal court, which handles usually the lowest of all the different types of crimes. And the legislative, which will be your city or town council. For us, locally here, we have our council for the legislature. Most of them have 7 members. Towns only have 5 members. Couple city, there are some smaller cities, if you're under 5,000, you too can operate with just 5 members, but everywhere in the state you're going to find either 5 or 7 members in the council. Towns had to be less than 1,500 in population at the time they were formed, as was Friday Harbor. We're the only municipality in the county, which is, well, what it makes is the city managers meetings I go to are very intimate affairs. I take myself down to Haley's. I've been in hers. I'll admit it, there might be pictures. But we are the only one that's incorporated here, which is a great benefit to us in some ways, in that there's some revenues, sharing revenues, that we get the benefit of sharing 100% because there's no other cities to have to share it with. So from that standpoint, it works out very well. Cities themselves have a much greater range of options of how they operate than towns do. I think that the original makeup and restrictions they placed on towns was this fear that you have a little tiny place with 800 people, and some smarty is going to get in there and learn how to manipulate the books and run away with the money, or find a way to get enough of his cronies together to manipulate the way the town works and to send contracts off. So they put real restrictions on how we operate that are around today. We have a treasurer, which is an elected position, and which is sort of antiquated for us because we have an appointed employee, Kelly Wilson, who is our finance director. But that only pays 90% of her salary. The other 10% of her salary comes from her elected position as the treasurer. The only real job of the treasurer is to invest the monies of the town. So it's not you get to set the salary on it. We just sort of split it between the elected position and the actual appointed position. But she sort of has a two-headed monster, but ends up on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference, other than she has some rights that other finance directors don't, where she has the final say on the investment of the monies of the town. The town must have a mayor, which is the one difference out of town is you can't operate with a manager. And there's restrictions on matters of money, control, and we also have a town marshal as well. You're mandated to have a town marshal. But for us, that town marshal does nothing more than sort of control the parking ticket process. So it's not a big power position. One other thing that's interesting about the towns is that there's no initiative and referendum process. If you're familiar that many cities around the state have adopted initiative and referendum where you can either by initiative bring something and make it law, or by referendum take something that the council has done and toss it out. That is not available in towns. It's just not a process which can be it's allowed.
I'm getting confused. You keep going between town and city and town and city.
Yeah.
What are they the same when you're talking about this?
No, I was saying towns do not have initiative and referendum.
Okay.
Cities, some of them do, some of them don't, you have to elect into it.
Okay, but I thought this was a town.
It is a town, but we do not have any initiative or referendum.
Okay.
We can't, by statute, we're not allowed to have initiative or referendum. It is, I mean, imagine what it's like when you've got first class, second class, third class, fourth class town.
I come from Alaska, add
Oh,
village
boy.
to the list.
Oh, yeah, village, yeah, that's just it. Back east especially, they have townships and villages and everything else. It's very confusing, and it's, you have to stop and think every time, you know, where are we, what are we doing with the restrictions? And they have separate town handbooks that they give out just to kind of figure out the differences in how we operate. But there's probably much more similarities than anything else. We're all subject to a lot of the same rules and regulations.
Would there be any reason for Friday Harbor, I mean, would Friday Harbor be eligible to turn itself into some other kind of thing, like a town? Now, is it big enough? And would there be any reason to do that?
We are a town.
We could,
I
in
mean,
fact,
turn it into a city, one of the
Yep.
classes of cities.
yeah, most in the state have gone for what's called a non-charter code city, where you have lots of powers. It's very well designated, you know exactly what you can and can't do. It's where everybody has gone for the last 30 years when they have adopted a new city. Everyone has gone that way. And yes, we could do it. The reason why, I'll tell you frankly, the reason why we have not done it is that we'd have to change the name to City of Friday Harbor. And nobody wants that. They like the town of Friday Harbor. And we went so far as to find out that we could become the city of the town of Friday Harbor. It just didn't roll off the tongue the same way. So we have taken all the downsides and you take lemons and you make lemonade. So we've
And
done.
would there have to, in order to do that, there would have to be a vote, would there?
There'd have to be a vote of the citizens,
Yeah.
yeah. You actually have to have an affirmative vote, so
Right.
that is, we've never really seriously considered, we talked about it, but it's not been real serious
What
consideration.
would be the advantages or disadvantages of going for city?
Just, you do not have the same restrictions on operation. It becomes sort of, well, I'll give you an example. It's sort of difficult when you set a special meeting right now. No special meeting can govern the expenditure of money. So if you want to, unless it's an emergency, so if you want to pass something that's going to expend money, you have to wait for a regular council meeting. You can't do it at a special council meeting. When you're a city, you can set a special council meeting, you have to give them the appropriate notice, and you can do anything you want at that meeting. We're very restricted here.
If we can't do referendums or petitions, I think you said, whatever, because we're a town. If we want, initiatives, if we want to become a city, what process do you use?
Oh, if
To
you, like
initiate.
a citizen wants to do it?
To initiate that process?
I think that you don't have a process to do it other than electing people that feel the same way you do.
Got it.
Yes.
A few years ago, there was talk about combining the town and county governments. Is that still floating around? Apparently not, huh?
Not that I've heard of, and
There's a lot of duplication that is relatively needless.
you know, frankly, because of the way we've restructured, there really isn't that much duplication. We do different things now. We have taken on, we contract for fire department. I was going to get to that in a minute, but we actually now no longer have the town fire department and the county. We have gone ahead and got rid of it, and we now contract with the fire department. Police is the same thing. We contract for the police services, we contract for the court services, we contract for the prosecutor, we contract for an awful lot of the services now. Where we probably don't is in the administrative end of it, but we have different goals and we do different things, and we provide urban level of service where the county provides a rural level of service. So it's slightly different in what they do. The counties by nature are for the most part rural-based, with the exception of maybe over on Orcas Island, the one section there. But the rest of the county is rural, and there's only a couple sections, Roach Harbor being one here, and the town are the areas that are actual urban areas. So they're slightly different there as well. But it's a relatively minor overlap overall from the expenditure standpoint, I think. But again, that's an opinion of mine, not shared by everybody, but I think that there's probably some benefits to having the town as a separate operating government. The actual limits of the town are, it used to be a different process for how the town would grow. We're not the size we were when we first incorporated. We were actually much smaller and have added to it by annexation over time. What really changed things was in 1990. The game changer was the Growth Management Act. I don't believe this county was mandated to abide by the Growth Management Act, but opted into it. And by opting into it, it caused a whole lot of different things to have to happen. It sort of segregated out what urban areas were and what rural areas were. And it gave significant amounts of power to the county to determine how the town would or could grow in the future. It created something called urban growth areas, and set urban growth boundaries, which were the area within which a town was authorized to grow, but did not necessarily have to grow. In many cities across the state, you'll find that there's urban growth boundaries that surround it, and the town, whenever it, or the city, whenever it wants to, could actually go in and annex those areas by going through a certain process. Here, there is next to no urban growth area for us to grow into. The county has not authorized us anything. In the past, it has allowed sections which were then immediately acted on, but there is no discretionary areas out there right now. In the past, the county authorized, and we then annexed the area that became the hospital, and also the area, the home trust property down at the end of Grover. That was, and then down the hill, and which was a huge controversial process when it happened, but it was the sort of the trade-off to get low-income housing on the island, and it also helped the county satisfy their needs for low-income housing under the Growth Management Act. So that urban growth boundary is a restriction. The only one we really have right now, we can actually see it from the building probably, is just right over here where Park Avenue connects with Guard. Up on the hill there, there's a little area of like 10 houses. Those are all in the county, even though they're in our urban growth area. So the town could in fact annex them if we wanted to. There's just really no need to, and there's no financial benefit to the town, and those people have not clamored to be brought in either. So we have reached détente.
Are taxes different in the town and the county?
I'm glad you asked that. The towns are much lower. It's not always the case. You know, across the state, one of the detriments, I'd say, of urbanization is that taxation is much higher in cities for the most part. Here, it just so happens that taxes are lower. As a matter of fact, I'll go out on a limb here and I'll say this: when you look at all the factors, we're probably the lowest taxed city in the state of Washington. Town or city, either way. Yeah, either one you want to use. We're the lowest tax. And the reason that comes about is our property tax is darn near the lowest. The only three that are beneath us are Hunts Point, Yarrow Point, and one of those other point cities there. And that's because the property values are so high, they can keep the rate down low. Now, I say we're lower than them, however, because they have a thing called utility tax, which there's only a handful of cities in the state that do not have a utility tax. That's a 6% add-on to your water, sewer, garbage, telephone, cell phone, cable, etc., etc. It's one of the major revenue points for most cities that operate here. Without utility tax, many cities would definitely fail. It's an absolute necessity. But we don't have it here because we've been lucky enough with our sales tax revenue that we didn't have to take the utility tax. So what we have is a very, very low property tax, no utility tax, no local B&O tax. So when you look at the numbers all across the board from just a rate structure, we really truly are one of the lowest taxed cities in the state. It changes every year as property values go up and down, the numbers shift. But I don't think it shifted enough to really take us off that loop. Yes?
What tax do people in San Juan County pay that people inside Friday Harbor don't?
The tax that the county residents pay that we don't inside the town is the roads tax. The roads tax is something that is not charged to town residents. Yes.
What about the town sharing any state taxes? Aren't there some programs where the state uses the taxes collect to support counties and towns? Or am I mistaken on that?
Yeah, especially these days, most of the taxes the state gets, they hold on to. they're not letting them out. They're cutting back on things they used to share with us. They used to share with us a lot more on liquor. We'd hoped that we were going to get something from marijuana. That hasn't happened. So we've, over time, been cut down more than added on to. I have a section on taxes. We can jump back into that unless you have a specific question. But the tax structure is interesting here on how we try to stay alive. After the IMAN initiatives came through, there was, like it or hate it. I can tell you this, I'm really mixed on it. And the reason I'm personally mixed on it is that I don't care for the watch salesman much myself. But the one thing is that towns and cities did it to themselves. They did it to themselves. The reason why that came about was the law used to be you could raise 6% per year if you needed it. And they took 6% every single year. Never varied. Everybody took their full 6%. And they did it for so long that taxes accumulated over a period of time really, really went up. And of course, there was always new programs they wanted to use it for, but that 6% cumulatively over time, raising the property tax again and again, that full amount. Now, were there some cities that didn't? Yeah, there were, but most were taking the full amount. And I think that the backlash that was experienced that brought us down to the 1% increase was probably a result of cities not really listening carefully to the constituents and not paying attention to taking what you need and not what you want. And so I have really mixed feelings about what happened, but I think that for the most part, a lot of us did it to ourselves.
I believe the county gets some road funds, whereas the town probably doesn't.
That's the road tax, yeah. But there's also, we get some money back. You get into a really complicated area. Everyone here heard the name CAPRM before? CAPRM funds. It's because when you look at, we don't have any highways. And because we don't have any highways, we don't get that state tax here. So we get a certain amount of money from the state government every year to try to make up for the fact that we don't get the roads, we don't have the highway monies that come through. So we get these CAPRM funds, which are to compensate in part for the loss that we don't
I get that we
receive.
don't get any federal funds for highways either then.
Yeah. But we still are eligible for state gas tax monies. As a matter of fact, when we built Blair Avenue here, we got $1.5 million to do the work on Blair and Mullis. That was a result of monies that came in through the gas tax. So it does come back sometimes, it just doesn't come back quite as often as you'd like. This is one of those times where you jump back into where you were. Speaking of the shared revenues, we don't get any of the revenue, I said, from marijuana, big cut in liquor. The Public Works Trust Fund was raided. That used to be one of our places. Yeah.
Before you move into revenue, you define this hierarchy, federal, state, county, town. But you have other levels that add to the complication of towns, municipalities. You have ports. In the city of Seattle, they have neighborhood councils. So there's other levels of complexity involved in this hierarchy of government that you've mentioned.
I think most strikingly is when you find port districts. They probably have the biggest possibility of impacting you. But you also have water districts. You have sewer districts. They even have weed districts. School districts. I mean, they're all over the place. And they call these junior taxing districts. You have hospital districts. You have island rec. You have park districts. There's all sorts of ones that are all statutorily authorized. And the way they usually get formed is there's somebody that clamors for it, and then they authorize it, and then people will start forming these organizations. So there's other taxation that usually comes through the property tax for all of them that supports their operations. Now, some cities are structured in a way where all the parks are taken care of through the municipality. Other places that don't have that will sometimes see a park district pop up and be a separately funded type of operation.
But it adds a level of complexity I don't think people recognize in city and town governments, because most of those special activities find themselves in urban areas, which are characteristically towns and cities.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you've got to blend. You have to understand who your partners are. Like for us, we're operating in the town, but we also have all the offices there of the county. We also have all the offices there of the port, and we also have Island Rec, all of which are other governmental entities operating here. We also have the fire district, which is operating right here. That's another separate governmental entity. So they all have their niches cut out. And you go back east, you'll find a completely different structural setup. You know, they operate completely differently. As a matter of fact, I've been told that in places like Massachusetts, there are no areas that aren't, you know, they're all structured into these townships where there is no real county. It's all larger cities, and their borders all touch upon each other. There's nothing left over. There's no true rural type land as we think about it.
That's not completely true. My son lives in Berkshire County, near Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And
it may not be Massachusetts. I'm saying that it's,
Okay.
it's one of the East Coast states is just, they're bereft of county area.
Mm-hmm.
They're all like municipalities because they all back up to one another. But for out here, we have a much more we've always had the urbanized area and then the rural area. When we talked about the Urban Growth Act before, the idea behind it was to protect the rural areas, protect the agricultural areas, and create a situation in which all the growth that was going to happens within the municipalities in the urbanized area. When they passed the Urban Growth, or the Growth Management Act, 49% of all people lived in urbanized areas. Now that number's up to 65%. It's changed significantly just since 1990.
The library is a junior taxing district.
I forgot the library, and we're standing right in the middle of it. There you go, thank you for that.
It's county.
The county?
Well, it's the tax is through the county, not the town, and it is only for this island.
Correct. It's a separate, yeah, like I said, there's many different ways you can set it up. We could have one fire district representing all the islands. We could have one library district representing all the islands. What usually ends up happening, though, is that people like local control, and things usually tend to fall towards where there's more local control available. And so you'll see library districts often being smaller than they possibly could be, although you get to a place like Seattle, and even in Seattle, you've got the King County Library System working within there too. So it's politics is a funny business. Yes.
1990, 49% urban, now 65%. Is that limited? Is that just the counties that follow the GMA?
No, that's statewide. That's a statewide number. Property tax, one of the more difficult concepts, surprisingly, to deal with because of how complex we do it here in Washington. We're one of 2 states in the country that does our property tax the way we do. 48 states, as I understand it, property tax is determined by setting a rate where you say we're going to charge people $1.49 per thousand. And they put that on, and you multiply it by the property value, and that's how it's determined. Much too easy for Washington. You know? What we have is we've got an authorized levy amount. And for instance, I'll just take the towns of approximately $400,000. Sometime way back in the history, we had our levy rate was set, and we live with it from year to year to year. Right now, it's $400,000.
that means that's the limit?
That's how much we can send out. We can levy less than that, but we can't levy more than $400,000. But every year they throw us that bonus, 1%, where we can raise it up by 1%, and then that, of course, compounds over time. Because once the 1% is in it, Then the next year you pay 1% on that 1% and so forth. But the way you figure out that everyone talks about rate per thousand, and the way you get to it is you have to take your property and figure out what percentage of the county you own and divide it into, or the town that you own, and you divide it in. For us, the $400,000, we don't know the rate until we find out later on what the assessed valuation is, and then it pops out the other side. So many times people talk about the rate as being what they, but really you're just paying a percentage based upon how much of the town you own. You own this little tiny sliver right here, that's your house, that's your property. You divide that into the total valuation of the entire town, and you multiply that number by what we assessed, 400,000, and a number pops out. And then you can turn it into a rate, but it's just a very complicated factor.
And that's just general fund, right? Because the junior taxing districts are over and above that.
And the junior taxing districts have a completely different way that they do it as well, which led to the EMS problem and Island Rec problem, which was they have a different type of restriction. For us, we can float up or down, depending upon property valuation. We can float up and float down all the way up to like $3.10 as a town. But there's other jurisdictions like the Island Rec that had a lid. They could float up to, I think it was 36 cents, and it had to stop there. That's as far as it could go. What no one ever realized is that we got into this habit politically across the state, and we all did it, of thinking that property values were going to go up forever. It was, we never thought that was ever going to change. But the impact of having property rates go down is that when you do that little calculation of your rate per thousand, it goes up. They're inversely related. So what happened was, as property values dove on assessments, Island Rec, boom, hit their lid. And they could still charge 36 cents per thousand, but when you multiplied that by the valuation, they didn't get as much as they thought they were going to get before. The actual problem that happened with Island Rec was they continued to pay them over and above the 36 cents. They should have stopped paying them when it hit the lid. They didn't, and they kept getting paid. And so now they're having to pay back monies that they received. They shouldn't have. The reason I mentioned the EMS levy is that they faced a similar type of problem, which was when they set their initial levy, there was a certain levy dollar amount, and then property values fell away. They were expecting and had done all their planning that they were going to receive a certain amount of money per year, because of course property values never go down. But then they locked up. So they have been trying to get a new levy for the last several years in order that they would be able to gain the amount of money they think they needed for operations. There's other politics involved that I don't want to get into.
One quickie, does this whole tax levy thing, is there a difference between what happens in the town urban area and the rural?
All town area is urban. There is no rural area of the town. It's all considered urban by definition.
Okay.
If you're in a city or town, you're urban. Even if you're on a farm.
Okay, got it.
You're considered to be urban. The property tax issues, are difficult because there's also another layer that comes in, and this is the 590 level. We have a constitutional provision that says that when you add up all those local taxes together, you add them all up, your hospitals, your libraries, your island recs, your fire, your town, your city, whatever it may be, you add them all up, it can't be more than $5.90 per thousand. Tell you what happened to me in North Bend. We were going along, and the big initial hit on property values came in, and we had something similar to Island Rec. We had the Side-View Metropolitan Park District, and values of property went down so low that it actually bumped up against the 590. It had never been seen in the state before. It had never happened. And some fire districts couldn't assess their full levy, and because they were at the bottom of the totem pole, the Mount Si Metropolitan Park District lost their entire funding. Nothing. It was because it was all being eaten up by all the other organizations. And so it's really important, if you're going to be on that chain, it's always nice to be at the top of the food chain. And for them, they were unfortunately at the bottom of the food, and they had to bring some special elections in an emergency to fix it. So there are a number of competing issues that go on in property tax, but the hardest one conceptually is this idea that we only assess a dollar amount, and this year we'll assess 400,000 plus 1% plus new construction, and that's it. And then after we're all done, you look at your evaluation, then we can tell you how much that is per thousand.
How does something end up at the bottom? Is it just because it's the last one formed?
Statutory. It's by priority.
And who sets that priority?
State legislature.
And parks are at the bottom? Where are libraries?
Libraries are just a little bit above that.
Figures.
Yeah, the libraries, and then trying to remember who the lower ones were. Fire districts, hospital districts are down low. I think they're even under libraries as well, so.
Where are cemeteries?
They're underground.
They're underwater. The cemeteries are, if you have a cemetery district, that's one of the lower ones that would probably be the first one to lose its funding in that scenario.
So where's Friday Harbor on the hierarchy?
The top, of course. Cities and towns are when they set the structure up, the main cities and towns is on the local level, they were given a priority, along with the county. The county has the same one as well. Schools are that's a separate funding issue. That doesn't fall into the local. It's not considered to be part of the local taxation.
So it's not included in the 590?
No, my understanding is that it's not part of the 590, that's completely separate, and again, it's all statutory, and you have to chase all this stuff down to find out, but it's complicated.
I'm sure I don't want to be a tax person.
Well, it can be tough. But property tax is one of the rougher areas, yes.
So you said we're one of two states that does that, sets the amount and then figures out the rate based on that, divided by. What are the advantages or disadvantages of being like the other, if we decided to be like the other 48, or is that even a possibility?
Well, you'd have to figure out what structure you wanted to do and make it fair, because it'd be like changing the way things are done significantly, and how you go about setting that first initial one would be difficult. Are you too high, or are you too low? And I think that there is generally a pretty well-received, people here are pretty happy with knowing this dollar amount, knowing you can't go up above 1% above that, unless you do what's called, you heard the term levy lid lift. But so we have $400,000 and we need $100,000 more per year. We can go to the voters and ask for a levy lid lift that resets the bar. It just pops you right back up, and you get in and you start charging $500,000. You're resetting yourself all over again. That happens a lot with, you'll see that quite a bit with libraries and other ones that will do a levy lid lift. They'll pop it up and they'll have a whole new operating number to work from.
And that's a simple majority?
Expire?
That's, levy lid lifts I think are the simple majority one. The bonds are the ones that aren't.
Don't those expire over time, the lid lifts, so then you have to reauthorize?
Some of them do. Some of them are permanent. Town can take one that's permanent, but I think some of the jurisdictions are limited in the number of years, 6 years for some of them, 4 for others. I can't ever keep them all straight. I wonder why, but there's I think some of them have to go back out and do a new levy every once in a while. I think right now Island Rec is coming back out in 2 months, asking because their levy is expiring. So. They're one of the 6-year ones. That kind of takes me over to the sales tax, which is a whole different animal. It's where we live for the town. We are very, very lucky that our taxes for our property tax, and without the extra taxes, are low because of the fact that we have a healthy and robust sales tax. Like tourism, hate tourism, whatever it may be, it does pay a significant portion of how we operate here. And we currently are at an 8.1% sales tax, and that's about ready to change. Of that 8.1 sales tax, only 1% of that goes to the town. We collect it, but the rest of it gets shipped off to the state and gets divvied up per the statute. We only get 1%. Then, right before we can grab that 1%, the county steps in and says, not so fast, and they grab 15% of the 1%. So when it comes down to it, we end up with 0.85 of 1%. So while we may collect 8.1, we don't get to keep all of it. We only get to keep 0.85.
And none of it filters back down to us? And
Most of that, no. Most of that's not, that's money that will not come back to us in any substantial amount. As a matter of fact, that's why with the TBD we just passed was so important to us, is that the Transportation Benefit District vote we just went through put an extra 0.2 of 1% on our sales tax. The idea being, it's always great to build your roads with other people's money. And for the most part, most of our sales tax was coming from other people. And some of it from us, clearly, but why not have them share? If the people in the county are driving in our town, let's have them share. If the people that come and visit us are coming in, let's have them share. So the idea was it was probably a lot more equitable to rebuild our roads by having this extra 0.2 on the sales tax rather than making it a property tax and having it just the residents pay for it. So that's a change. I want to just take a second. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hypothetically, if you were to keep and maintain all sales tax that was collected within town limits of Friday Harbor, would that meet the operating budget needs for the town?
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to come down off my golden throne every day to talk to the little people. There'd be so much, I mean, you think about it, that would be, we're making $1 million a year of our operating budget comes from sales tax. If we had all of it, we'd be talking about $8 million of revenue a year, which would be obscene, first of all. We couldn't even find ways to spend all of it. It just wouldn't be fair. I could, but I don't know if it's right. There's a difference there. But no, it's clearly not set up that way. We never get it all. I do want to show you this. I will tell you right now, I found this on Facebook. Not a regular reader of The Stranger. Interesting magazine, but not a regular reader. But they did have a great article in this week. This is a map of the state of Washington. And the red areas are those that are primarily Republican. The blue areas are the areas that are primarily Democrat. I don't call it out. That's not good. That's not bad. It's just what this, you can see by the color. What's most interesting about this is it is a map that shows the total money that each county receives from the state for each dollar they send the state. So places like Ferry County over in eastern Washington, for every dollar they send the state, they get $3.16 back. Wow. Spokane County, for every dollar they send, they get back $1.35. Lincoln County, they get $2.76 back for every dollar they send to the state. Then you get over to the western side. Pierce County, for every dollar they send in, they get $1.25 back. That's pretty good. Then you go way down to King County. They only get 62 cents back for every dollar they send the state. And I thought, that is just a horrible crime. Wait a minute. San Juan County only gets 46 cents back for every dollar that we send the state. We are the absolute lowest in the state of Washington. So we have low taxes for our citizens, and for every dollar we do send off to the state, we get the lowest amount of money back again. And I think that is that's information that I'd like to keep and use in the future when you're talking about when it's time to set, grant monies and other distributions. It's time for us to get our share here, because we are absolutely positively the lowest location in the state for getting money back from the state once it goes in.
I thought a little while ago you said once it goes in, it doesn't filter back down.
It doesn't, except for things like when you talk about the Transportation Improvement Board, which is sending us back money from gas tax.
Okay.
Or there's other types of grants available that may not be coming from the sales tax.
Okay.
But this money I was talking about, as far as what goes in and comes back, that's overall dollars sent. That's property tax, sales tax, all the taxes. They did accumulation of all of it. But I thought it was just important to kind of show that while you have a little changes here or there, it's a pretty significant difference. But we're even lower than King County, and that's hard to believe. Yeah.
Do you know how they
calculated the impact of the ferries in that calculation? Because they might, I mean, depending upon how they calculated the costs related to the ferries, that could change.
That wouldn't be money that came back to the county. That'd be money that
That's what I'm saying,
expended.
but the state may look at it as money that benefits the county.
The legislators.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been in those numbers, because this was direct payments. That money goes to WashDOT and the Washington State Ferry System. It doesn't come back. This is actually money that's paid to the counties itself. And like I said, the one interesting thing about this is that if you break it all down, it'd be interesting to see exactly what the numbers are. I think it's just more illustrative, thank you, to show that we are probably not getting our fair share when it comes to the distributions.
Duncan, the money that comes back, is that a combination of money that we would get back plus grants that we're asking for and get funded?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's the direct payments or whether or not it includes grant monies as well. And it didn't get into that level of detail, breaking it down. And again, like I said, there's probably arguments to be made that it should be adjusted upwards or downwards a little bit. But I think overall it shows that we're probably getting less money overall from the state than other locations.
If WashDOT's not included in that, then the majority, vast majority of money they spend goes to the urban counties. And also, does that include what we're referring to as the junior taxing districts, money from the state directly into those groups?
What it's talking about, it looks at the total amount of money that comes from a county jurisdiction, all the jurisdictions within the county going in, and what those counties then get back in some fashion from the state.
What the county, but that would be inclusive of all
the towns, every other district, what everybody gets within that area. Okay. And like I said, lies, damn lies, statistics. Right. But I think that if you can use it for illustration purposes, that's really the only benefit, because King County, for every dollar they send in, they only get back 62. I mean, clearly they are the driver for the state of Washington. And when you look at other counties on the east side, they're getting back $3.16 for every dollar. It's pretty significant.
Just my knowledge of where money goes, it doesn't go to Ferry County.
Well, but when you look at what they get from them, that's right. On a grand scale, right. Ferry County gets this little slice right here. Right. But based on what they've put in, just clearly, no, I'm just saying the urbanized areas have always supported.
Just for curiosity,
the rural.
Does the stranger share with us how many for every dollar that we send into the state? We get 96 cents back in services distributed to counties.
Well, it should be a you think it should be a one-to-one type of situation.
It can't be, because you've got staff there operating. Yeah. So
there's always be some cut that comes off for that.
Any idea what that is?
No. All I know is we're getting 46 cents back in this county. And you're next.
Well, other things that come to us that as ordinary citizens, we won't necessarily know where the money came from. We get federal government grants and federal government monies to improve our airport, for instance, or even the port of Friday Harbor. And as ordinary citizens, we don't know that money doesn't come from the state.
You have to, and for us, I'll give you an example of where that's coming in. I applied a few months ago for money to rebuild the first part of Tucker. And I put the application in, crossed my fingers, said that'd be great. And the Transportation Improvement Board of the state of Washington came forward and said, yes, we will fund that up to $800,000. Great grant to get, excited to do the project. Then we said, what are we going to do beyond that point and go on? Turns out now we're looking at some federal money, some STP money. So we're going to probably have a project that as we drive down the street of Citizens is one street as we drive down. But it may be rebuilt half by state monies, half by federal monies. And because of the way they are, they can't intermingle. So we're going to have to completely keep these monies separate and apart and have like a delineation mark, like a DMZ on the ground. That big dip is at the bottom of the hill, right about there. That's going to be the DMZ on the other side of it, and we're going to have to keep the money separate. But for me, you look to all the different sources you can find, but you're right, there's federal, there's state, and then there's sometimes even local.
So those are benefits that the taxpayers of both the town of Friday Harbor and San Juan County aren't paying for. So when you drive down the road and mumble about how your tax dollars are being used, Maybe not necessarily more tax.
Sometimes we get lucky. We got lucky on Blair.
Federal tax for dollars.
Yeah.
Your federal.
Federal tax dollars, yeah, I mean, it comes from...
Gas tax.
You pay gas taxes from them too, and you pay your federal taxes. The federal government has many different ways of gaining its taxation as well. Yeah, but again, you have to know where the monies are available, keep up to speed on... one of the other projects that we're working on now is in the main downtown area, all of our stormwater goes into the storm drain and goes out into the harbor. And we don't have any treatment facilities for that. And so generally our stormwater is pretty darn clean. You know, what goes out, but it still is not as best it can be. It still has surfactants that were on the surface of the road, oils that spill, you know, brakes grinding, little things come down there. So what we're doing is we're going and asking for money from the State Department of Ecology. They paid for our study that we're doing right now. We're going to build a waterfront vault with storm filters in it. And so what will happen is that first flush that comes down will hit that vault, and until the flow gets to be too high, it will all go through the filters that are there, and will take out most of that first flush of the really bad stuff is in that, and then most of the oils and your particles and stuff. It's a maintenance nightmare, but that's what we're shooting for down there. And that one's a state one. And we may have to also look for some federal monies as well. You cobble together what you can to try to build these projects. Yeah.
A couple of questions. Is that just a Spring Street downtown runoff for that vault?
No, it covers all the way. Well, it covers all the way up to that what they call Basin 4, goes all the way up, most of the way up Spring Street, and then spreads out from there. It all falls in. When they first built the storm system here in the town, there really wasn't much of a concern for what they were putting out. So there weren't treatment systems built along the way. So it all kind of flows together. So we're trying to figure out what the best way to clean it in the most financially feasible. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Feasible way. And this is it. And we think that a good chunk of that will be paid for by grant monies as well.
Duncan, I recall that
And my second question is, will you have time with your outline to hit the major infrastructure challenges that you face in town?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's coming up here pretty soon. I've got a list of them.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you have water quality measurements out in the inlet there to show that indeed the water quality is bad due to runoff from the town?
Indeed, our water quality is not bad, but it's not as good as I'd like it to be. I've kept records. We've got records now going back about 5 years where we take samples.
Yes.
And we check for turbidity, copper, pH. We check for surfactants, for the oils and stuff like that. And generally, it's excellent. Where it's not excellent is, and where it's still not bad, but it's problematic, is right after a rain when we've had like 6 weeks of sunshine. That's when the water gets kind of cloudy, and that's the kind of stuff we'd really like to capture, because that's the one that probably has the greatest impact of impacting the waters. But we capture it coming right out of the pipe before it enters. So I can tell you this, that we've tested near shore and then tested further out where there would have been dissipation. There's really no significant difference between the two. The only place you can actually ever see is when you're collecting right at the pipe after a first storm event. Then you can see it.
Well, you might ask yourself, is it really worth doing this water quality control structure then?
If it's paid for by other people, number one, and number two, it's never going to get better. It's only going to get worse over time. So the idea here is let's get rid of what we do have, the problems that are there, and in the future, we don't have to worry so much about it getting any worse. Yeah.
Is the rain garden outside of your favorite pub effective? Or have there been some tests that indicate that it has delivered the goods in terms of filtering out?
We have been waiting for results from the county MRC on that for several years. I've never seen any tests that say that it is effective. I can guarantee you this though, it's not hurting that water. It can only help. So
Yeah, but if somebody's gonna use that as a model, invest more money in it, they need to know if it works.
That, the rain garden, to put those in all the way up the street and to utilize them, I think that the bang for your buck is better spent on doing a waterfront system where you're cleaning out in that fashion. Although on Blair, when we did the project there, we actually put in a small system by the school that's also, cleaning it as well. The base of one of the trees is actually a system to clean the stormwater, so.
So how, if this thing is located on the front of the, down the bottom on the port area, it's gonna be pretty much an eyesore and maybe a smell sore and
Well, it shouldn't be a smell, it's clean water. And as far as an eyesore goes, we're building it out at the bottom of Memorial Park. We're gonna be building out like an extra 12 feet. And we're gonna have a railing around it and benches and probably, things to do on top of it. It'll be
trees?
Trees, yeah, well, that's what I'm serious, but we're gonna have vegetation on it as well. It's just gonna be an additional public space.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, all the stuff is down underneath. There'll be a lid you can lift up and crawl down into where they keep all the filter system. So it should be actually an asset to the community rather than an eyesore.
because I've lived in California where those things just are ugly.
Behind you first, then we'll get back.
Is that port property?
No, that's town property.
And Duncan, just to keep this issue of stormwater in perspective, I think there's something like 700,000 gross square feet of impervious surfaces in Friday Harbor that drains into Friday Harbor.
I have to take your number I don't know.
Yeah, and so Spring Street as an impervious surface probably represents maybe 4 or 5%.
No, this what goes down that pipe, you gotta remember the pipe that goes down at the bottom of Spring Street is like 4 feet in diameter.
Oh, no, but
it's
just simply the notion of rain gardens on Spring Street.
Oh, yeah.
The solution really requires something like what you're talking about.
Something bigger, and the problem is you don't want, the bigger you get, the bigger eyesore it is, the more it costs. To eliminate all of the, to eliminate 100% of it all the time is just, you could design it, but it would be not financially feasible and it would be pretty ugly. But we're going to be capturing 100% of what they call the first flush, which to me, that's a win, and it's the right thing to do.
You should have a look at all the garages in town when they flush out their
Brings me
floors.
to my next topic of I&I studies, which inflow and infiltration. What's getting into a lot of that is the sewer system problem that we have, and that is, when we have our rains, these downspouts around garages and all that, a lot of them are hooked directly into our sewer system rather than to the stormwater system. And so we have, the impervious surface is supposed to be taken care of by what you pay for stormwater. But a lot of time that impervious surface is being routed directly into the sewer system. So when you have a storm event, it's like the Super Bowl at a commercial, and the levels go up significantly during the rains. So we know there's a lot of problems in there. One of the projects we did last year was pretty interesting when it had to do with the I&I to solve it. We had a line that ran from Sunken Park, kind of where the new Mercantile is. It runs right from there, underneath Sunken Park, underneath the ferry lanes, then down to the waterfront. And it was in need of repair because the line was breaking up, it was cracked. And that was going to be a huge dollar amount. But we used some new technology which is called cast-in-place plastic. They run just a balloon down the inside of the line all the way down, and they run hot air into it, and it blows up and it forms to the outside of what's left of the pipe, and then hardens in place, and you've got a brand new sewer pipe inside the existing pipe.
That's a sewer pipe, is that a storm sewer?
No, that's the sewer sewer.
That's a sanitary sewer.
That's the sanitary sewer. Unfortunately, they're supposed to have to follow up after this thing is hardened, and all of your side sewer connections are now blocked. So they have to send a little machine down that knows exactly how far to go, and it drills into the sidewall and then opens it back up again as it goes down so people can start getting back in.
I hope that name is not Bertha, that machine.
No, well, unfortunately what happened was the machine got down to a certain point, and because of the way the pipe had fallen, it became oblong at that one point, it couldn't get through.
Sounds familiar.
So one of the gentlemen from the company that does this, who obviously was the low man on the totem pole, had to go down the 18-inch pipe with ropes around his ankles as he was lowered down and had to go about 250 feet down in the sewer pipe to hand open up the holes. And it was at that point I said, I don't care what law school cost, I'm so happy. That would have been that would have been just about the worst. Jumping back into the materials here real quick, the other revenues we have besides the property tax we get and the sales tax, we also get, there's building permits and subdivision fees. So we have a limited number of things that we have, but thank goodness for that sales tax. On our expenditure side, as I mentioned before, we contract for an awful lot of our services. While we do a lot, public works, finance, are all our own. We contract for the courts, we contract for fire protection, we contract with the police. But we do our own public works. We have water, which is a lake, as most of you know, I think. We have Trout Lake on the other side of the island, and it's about 5.5 miles back into town, and we have to maintain that line. That line is now 60 years old.
Does the town own Trout Lake?
The town owns all the water rights in Trout Lake, and it owns all the property around it as well, yes. So we have 600 acres of a watershed there, and we have all the water rights.
I understand that line, that 5.5 miles of line, has asbestos pipe in it.
Asbestos concrete pipe, that's
Yes.
right. We're going to do something that's really unique, and I think we're probably innovators across the country on this one, is that we're actually going to go out and try to do a project before it falls apart. Which I know it's unique thinking, but what we're actually doing is that this year, we're starting right now, we've got the applications into the USDA to get funding. It's a $9 million project to replace that line. And it's all the way from the dam down a very, very steep hill, eventually goes to the water treatment plant, and then from the treatment plant back into town, and it fills up the water distribution system from there. So that's a big project. It's going to be going on probably for a good chunk of 2016. We're trying to line up the final engineering and the money right now, but that's going to be taking up an awful lot of our time. But we really have to get this done before, if we had an earthquake today, the water line from the dam down to the treatment plant is not as secure as one would want it.
Are you planning a trail on top of that?
Actually, the trails through the system, through the entire watershed, has been a long time discussion. There's good, there's bad. The Seattle approach is, if you come into our watershed, we'll shoot first and talk to you later. And then out here, we have sort of adopted that, it is verboten to go up into that watershed, mainly for here because of the fire hazard. And so we don't allow the trails into the actual watershed itself because of the fire hazard.
I understand that. I'm talking about as you come down into town. Is that pipe coming down the middle of the road or on the side, and are you talking
Middle of the
about-
road. It's going to be underneath the traveled portion. But a lot of people also like to know about the trails up there. There's nothing I would like more than to do it, but with this island, with the drought situation we get into, it becomes so tinder dry up there, we have to have people going up on a daily basis to check on it. It's dangerous.
I used to be with the Trails Committee, and, you know, we heard this from your predecessor, but yet you have examples here on the island, and a good example here on the island of Briggs Lake out at Roach Harbor. They allow public access. And you have Moran State Park on Orcas, and they, you know, free access, and it gets a lot of usage, and I don't believe there's ever, and it's also drinking water, I understand, for East Sound, or maybe for Rosario, I'm not sure. Also, I talked to your, I don't know if he's still your fire chief, but there was a fire chief here who came down from Alaska several years ago, and he thought there was a benefit to having people on the ground up there. That eyes and ears on the ground was a good thing, and that the town also had a responsibility to go in there and clear out all of the accumulated debris that was really what the fire danger was all about, that there hadn't been good management of the watershed. And he was going to do something about it, but I don't think he's here anymore, I'm not sure.
No, keeping the debris cleaned up there is one of our biggest problems. Is, you know, you want to take away all the fuel, so that even if you had like a lightning strike, that you're not going to have a problem. The real issue is that The reports that I've read as to what the potential damage could be based upon the way that where the fuel is coming to the lake and surrounding it, is that a major fire up there could possibly keep that water from being drinkable for 6 months to a year, and then even after that, it would be only in portions that it could be released again because of what would happen with the slough into the, any of the slough off of the fire debris into the water itself and how it travels down the lake. Like I said, I'm no expert on that, but I have read the materials we have there as to the potential impacts. Whether or not it would be better to have people up there watching or not is a political question that just simply can't be answered. It's one of those ones you have to choose one way or the other. As it currently stands, they don't want people accessing into the watershed. That's the current political stand of the council. Whether or not that's going to change in the future, it certainly could, because it's always been on the people have been talking about it for a long time.
Well, I live on Mount Dallas, and that road that goes down by Trout Lake is one of the only ways you can get off the mountain if Mount Dallas Road is blocked by a fire.
We have no problem with access in an emergency situation.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Everybody remember it, because that hasn't been the communication.
No.
So, that's great. I'm glad you said that.
But but of course, the emergency can't be you're out of milk and need to get your can.
I just worry about a fire, and I have another way to go down the mountain, I think, but it's a very frightening thing, particularly for people that live off of Mount Dallas Road.
We would expect that those up on Mount Dallas, the first thing that would happen is you bring a truck down first and run through the gate, if that was ever happening. I mean, there's no need. This is simply a situation where we really don't want it. In the wintertime, it's not a problem. It really isn't that bad. In the summertime, it becomes tinder dry up there. It is pretty bad.
Back in the 1980s, we had quite a drought.
Yes.
And Trout Lake got down to about 40 days left of water before the drought broke. If that was repeated, do we have enough water for the town?
Well, we have not since that time raised the dam level. And that's DAM. But I believe that back in the 80s when that drought occurred, and correct me if I'm wrong since you were here, I think they were also operating the gravel pit. And the gravel pit was using about 30 to 35% of all the town water. So with that being taken away, we're probably a little bit less likely to suffer. Wasn't this last summer, the summer before last, we had what I would say is probably the driest summer you can have around the state of Washington. It doesn't get much drier than that. And we never got down, we were still 20 inches above the point where we had to treat the water differently because it would get murky. So I'm never going to say we could never have a drought again, but I think some of the elements that led to it have gone away. But we also do not have any real need to raise the level of that dam and deal with the environmental consequences. In addition to the public works area where we take care of the water, which we just talked about, and that project that'll be most of my life, we also do our own sewer treatment plant.
Is everybody in the town connected to the sanitary sewer?
They're supposed to be. Yeah, I think there's like 2 septic systems left in town. There's not many of them. And they were there grandfathered when they were annexed in at some point in the past. If you build now, you can't. There's no septic tanks allowed. We also operate the refuse. The big change there is we're looking at probably 7 days away from tipping on island. We used to take our garbage trucks off on a daily basis, so we paid a driver to drive all the way to Anacortes and dump the garbage in the truck and all the gas and the ferry fares and come back again. The folks have taken over out there. They've built a new shed out there. I just went out and inspected it. It's pretty amazing. And so we're going to be able to tip on island hopefully this month. And what it will mean is we'll be paying a little bit more per pound, but we will not have to take our trucks off island anymore. We'll have less impact on our personnel. And in the long run, will probably be really a good deal financially for us, especially since as part of the deal to use that property, the town owns it. So we made the deal that the rates that we pay are locked for 10 years. So that's really nice. We're not be looking at any huge increases, although we did promise them that we would pay the increase of any ferry fares, because that, believe it or not, ferry fares may go up over the next 10 years. Who knows? We also run the community and planning and community development office, which is all the coming in for applications, the building, the inspections, building official services. We have our finance office, which takes care of all the finances, and then the administration, which basically is my department as well. So those are where our expenditures go to, is providing goods and services to the town folk from those revenues that we received. We also have some special commissions and committees. We have the Planning Commission, which is basically that's the planning arm, real estate and development. We have the, they also do the comprehensive plan. They also do all the development regulations. They have to review them before the council adopts them. We have the Lodging Tax Advisory Commission. We're blessed here in having a lot of people come and visit us in the summertime. And with the lodging tax, there are revenues that are created that can only be spent on tourism-related activities. That's both, the town can use it for its own buildings to actually build facilities, such as the bathrooms were at one time built with LTAC monies, or they can also support programs. This last year, the LTAC supported a couple of different programs. Number one, as a visitation technique, we lit the Christmas tree down there, the elm trees in Memorial Park. That was done with money from the LTAC. We also used that LTAC money to buy 3/4 of the cost of the new garbage cans you see around downtown. We were able to do that as well. We were able to show the state auditor that we had an extraordinary need for garbage cans because of the amount of tourism that we had here. And so we justified 3/4 of the expense being paid for out of those LTAC monies. Again, it's just a creative way of finding ways to save money in our overall operations. So the Lodging Tax Advisory also gives away money on an annual basis to those that apply for, some money goes to the Visitors Bureau, goes to, I think Sasha Von Dossow this year got some money for a Chamber Music Festival he's going to be putting on. The Whale Museum gets money. IMA has some advertising expenses they defray with that. So it's spread out amongst all the different organizations here that impact tourism. We also have the Historic Preservation Review Board. Sandy Straylew, many of you know her. She's in charge of that. And they review applications to change a lot of the buildings that are in our historical area and are about ready to do a landmark ordinance. And one other thing to look for is we're probably about 3 or 4 months away from starting to put out historical placards, which will be one in Memorial Park, 3 along the waterfront, 1 up at Overlook Park that will tell the history of the town with pictures and text. They should be really, really beautiful. The first cuts I've seen of them have been pretty fantastic.
So are there buildings that are on the list of historical places?
No, there's 2 different things. We have the landmark ordinance, which is to take individual buildings and landmark them. Mm-hmm. Then we have this placard, which will be like on the sidewalk, so people that are walking along can stop and read the story of a particular area. It tells the story of Memorial Park.
I just wonder, because I know that if you've got something that's on the list, the federal list of historic places or buildings, you can't do much modification without permitting from them.
I wouldn't even begin to try to tell you that I know enough about that to tell you how it works, but I can tell you that if you are on the historical list, then there are going to be restrictions. I don't know if any of our buildings are on the national historic list,
yeah,
but many of them are on the state list.
Duncan, it's an actual district in the town of Friday Harbor. It's an historic district.
Yep. Yeah. And everything that's within that district is subject to the potential HPRB review process when you're making external modifications within there. Right. The most recent one was we had to negotiate quite a bit. I think the end result is actually quite nice. Is the building used to be called Jerry's Mall. Mm-hmm. When they redid that, they worked with the HPRB to do it, to make sure that it had some historical elements to it that would make it, and I think that it's really quite an asset for downtown compared to what it looked like before. So they're not quite done, but they're getting there. We also have the Transportation Benefit District. We talked about that earlier. That's the brand new one, the .2 tax that money that is raised, that .2 sales tax increase, has to be used exclusively for building road projects. And those lists of road projects are on our website. They're very specific about which ones they can be. But we have to use that money specifically for that purpose. We have no other options. Then lastly, our brand new one is the Friday Harbor Arts Commission, which was just formed, 7 members, that hopefully is going to start getting us some public art. It's also covering literary arts, performing arts, but most importantly, I think, was the physical arts and those that could be displayed in public. We really do have a dearth of public art here in town. It was not a priority previously, and we're trying to make it more of a priority, and the council has dedicated some money towards actual acquiring this art and placing it properly in the Arts Commission will have a big lot to do with that. Issues facing the town. Somebody, I can't remember which one you asked it, but it was issues about what we're going through. I've talked about the water transmission line from the lake to the town. We're building a new water tower at the water plant itself. We have to have a certain amount of contact time with our chlorine that we put in the water because it comes from an above ground source. This will have an additional contact period time at the plant itself, which will help us with our operations. We're doing water line upgrades continually through the town. The most recent, in the future, the next one will be, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Spring Street. In the fall, late fall, we're going to be doing a water and sewer line replacement from the movie theater up to Argyle. So it should only be a week and a half or whatever, but I guarantee you I'll get a phone call. We're talking about a sewer treatment plant expansion. We need another digester, so that one's on the horizon. As I talked about before, the sewer line inflow and infiltration problem, we're going to have to do a study to find out where we can cut down on that inflow that comes into the treatment plant, which causes lots of problems. We have some sewer line replacements. Hopefully we can use that CIPP that we talked about, which is that cast-in-place plastic. This time we'll make sure we can get the machine down there. I don't want to see that guy have to go back down the hole again. We have stormwater collection projects. We have some real problems up on the hill where Harrison House is, if you know where that is, up on the hill, and along Harrison, and up above that on Frank Street. There's some problems in there where we need to collect the stormwater and get it out of there. And right now it's not being done real well. I talked about the stormwater filtration vault on the waterfront. We're talking about the tipping on Island. We're almost done with that floor, so that'll be pretty soon. We have some aging refuse equipment, so we have on order a new garbage truck that will be here hopefully in about 2 months. They had to start building it, and we ordered it back in October, and I think it comes 2 months from now. We have about $12 to $15 million needed for all the street repairs we have in town. We sort of went through and said, well, if we did everything up to standard to make it look new, what would it take? So probably $15 million. We're never going to get that. But this Transportation Benefit District, if we can start chipping away at it, $250,000 a year that comes from that, plus the other monies we can divert from the general fund on an annual basis. We're hoping that about $350,000 to $400,000 a year can be dedicated towards doing road projects.
Would sidewalks be included in these projects? Where
Yes,
there aren't
sidewalks
sidewalks today? There will always be a sidewalk with a new project?
For the most part, yes, and I'm glad you asked that question because the next project that actually is starting in a week and a half is on Marguerite, from here on Guard up to Park. We are going to, don't get too excited too quick because the first thing they're doing is replacing the water line underneath the road. So we're going to tear the thing completely up, replace the water line, and then cover it back up with nasty, bumpy, awful cover. And then we're going to come in behind that and rebuild the entire street and actually have a sidewalk down Marguerite Street. So kids can walk from the high school, up Park, around the corner, and down to the library and stay on the sidewalk the entire time. So I'm really excited about that. Later on, the next couple of years, we're going from Park to Spring Street on Marguerite because that's just a nasty road. It's awful. But that lower part is the worst. And hopefully we'll be on that one by the end of the year. And we're sorry for the delays it'll cost. I know it'll surprise you, but I actually heard from some people on Blair when that was under construction. Some of them were not happy about having to take a detour. So there'll be a detour on Marguerite for a while, but it's all for a good cause. So we talked about Blair Avenue, the project there, the Tucker Avenue coming up, Marguerite. Grover needs a lot of work as well. That's going to be coming up in the next several years. We're talking about, those of you, anybody here live in the area over by Spruce? Okay, well, it's Spruce Street, if you get back in that area there's only one way in and out. You have to come back to Argyle. But there is the Nash Street cut through. So we're actually talking about building out Nash Street and finishing that so you could go from the marketplace directly back into that neighborhood, which would relieve the intersection at Argyle of a lot of traffic. So that one's coming up. We just have to get the money in the bank from the TBD, so I'm guessing give us like 18 months on that one.
So that's already town right away.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
We've got it all. We just need to build it. And stormwater is a big problem through there. We have to pick all that up, but we have the right of way. We just need the construction dollars. And we're always looking for a new grant somewhere, but we've kind of tapped out all of our resources on that recently. We just finished up the Sunshine Alley Master Plan, which was the redevelopment of Sunshine Alley over time. It kind of gave us our blueprint for how we're going to go about rebuilding that area. We're going to try to get the low-hanging fruit this year and then work with the neighbors and over time build that out to make it a really nice public space back there that we can all be proud of. It won't take too much to make it look better. It'll take a whole lot of work to make it look great, and we hope everyone gets on board to help us make that project happen. Then the completely non-controversial branding plan. We actually have finished it. Our mascot's going to be Woody the Woodchuck. And we're going to, Woody the Woodchuck we'll gnaw our way into your hearts.
That'll show up on Brand Rage.
No, we're nowhere near done. We're still meeting as a board, and I think that I just wanted to scare you a little. Yeah, you never know where it's going to pop up. No, the one thing that has been really clear what we made is that we're not going to be made into something we're not, and it's not going to be cute. It will not be cute. It will not be cute. It will be something that hopefully we can all live with and be proud of and look at. And even if you don't like it, at least you can look at it and go, yeah, I can live with that. And that's really our goal. We've listened to everybody, and it's tougher than you think it is with all the different opinions.
Duncan, I want to thank you or whoever is working for the town to get rid of the Scotch broom on Upper Spring Street, and I hope they're pulling the roots out
We're trying.
as well.
Yeah, we're trying. That's a big. We got a letter from the county saying, please speed that up.
Yes, it looks very much better already. Thank you.
No, thank you. Did want to mention about the branding plan. One, we looked at a lot of places, a lot of different brands, and we didn't, like I said, this whole cute factor, just, I just can't tell you how much I hate cute. But I can tell you that there are some ideas out there that begin to make you say, we can make this make sense. There's an article that Mother Nature Network ran an article about a month and a half ago, and this article was a revelation to me. And the name of the article was 7 Cultural Concepts We Don't Have in the U.S. And so I said, well, that's interesting. So I went down, and the first one that I came across was friluftsliv. It's Norwegian, friluftsliv. And I read it, I said, well, that's interesting, what's it mean? And it said, friluftsliv translates directly from Norwegian as free air life, which doesn't quite do it justice. Coined recently in 1859, it is the concept that being outside is good for human beings' mind and spirit. It is a term in Norway that is used often to describe a way of life that is spent exploring and appreciating nature. Anna Stoltensberg, culture coordinator for Sons of Norway, had mentioned this, and other than that, it's not a strict definition, she said. It can include sleeping outside, hiking, taking photographs, or meditating, playing or dancing outside for adults and kids. It doesn't require special equipment, includes all 4 seasons, and needn't cost much money. Practicing friluftsliv could be simple as making a commitment to walking in a natural area 5 days a week. And I thought, those are the type of It's like Farfignugan. You have to know what it is to understand what the one word is. But it was very interesting. The next one they talked about, which also got me thinking, was one from Japan. This is a Shinrin Yoku, the Japanese term that means forest bathing. And unlike the Norwegian translations above, this one seems a perfect language fit. The idea that spending time in the forest and natural areas is good preventative medicine, and there's actual benefits to it. Now, those are probably, we're not going to have Friluftsliv. But the idea is that there are concepts out there that can in fact capture what we are at our essence without turning us into Woody the Woodchuck. So I would ask you please not to worry about that part of it, but we're trying our best to come up with a whole concept that will be acceptable and that you can look at, be proud of, say, that really represents what we are.
Is that just a Friday Harbor thing, or is that a whole island thing?
This is a Friday Harbor only. The islands are already branded through the Visitors Bureau.
Right.
This is just, when they do special ads for us,
Just Friday
we
Harbor.
need to know what to tell them to put in those ads that really says what we are. And that also when the council makes decisions in the future, you make decisions based on running it through that brand filter, which is, do we want to build on the waterfront? No. Our brand says that we're this and that we don't do that type of thing, and so you run it through and you don't do it. So I hope that, I've tried to tell people that we don't want to make this, our attempt here is not to ruin the town or shove something down their throats, but we may actually be able to come up with something that actually enhances us. That's my goal.
So, are you saying, or could I take this as to be a comforting word in light of the first meeting you had that I came to, where I went home feeling very discouraged?
Yeah, that's because you listened to Roger Brooks that night. That was a horrible thing to do.
Who's Roger Brooks?
I told him before that thing started, I said, look, you're dealing with a different crowd of people. And he was just like, yeah. And then he came out there and started showing film clips of money falling from the sky. I'm like, oh my God, no, this is not what we're about. And so we have been on a continual mission to stay ahead of him and frankly on top of him to keep this from becoming something that that we are not. And
this is worth this whole meeting.
I don't want to see any of those other things. Now, he does some very good work.
Who is this guy? I'm sorry.
He's the gentleman we hired that is doing the overall branding effort, but it's being driven from the bottom up. My goal is to make sure that he understands that when it comes from the bottom up, that it stays that way and doesn't become something that he wants it to become, because we're not doing Woody.
You need to get somebody else.
You mentioned that this is for the town on Friday Harbor. What is the county's brand?
It's the Visitors Bureau basically has done that, inspiration for the senses. You'll see all the ads, the pictures. You'll see them if you go to travel magazines, Alaska Airlines, in Sunday newspapers, everywhere. They've been doing this for several years. They do a very good job of it.
We also have the byways.
The city byways.
That's another, they have their own branding.
Those signs,
Yep.
which is their brand.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes?
The Urban Growth Act notwithstanding, what's being done in the county or in the town to limit growth so we can have all this great stuff that we're talking about? Because growth is going to kill us eventually if we don't start to limit it.
Wow, you and I could probably sit down over a beer some night and argue that one. I don't think growth is going to kill us. I think growth may eventually save us, in that it's going to provide us with the services we want. The trick is, don't ruin this place in the process of letting it grow somewhat. You got to clean it up. You got to get living wage jobs here. You have to get people so that they can actually afford to not have to work 3 jobs during the year, or even at the same time for some of them. But I don't think the growth is really the issue. It's the right kind of growth and not losing what we are in the process.
I'm not sure what the right kind of growth is, but something else you mentioned there, would you then favor a $15 an hour minimum wage for the county and the town?
Not in my job description.
You don't?
That one, I really, that's a political thing that I shouldn't even step into. I mean, I have an opinion.
What's your opinion?
My opinion is I wouldn't talk about it because it really wouldn't be proper. But I'll tell you this, is that it is neither as great as it's promoted to be, nor as bad as it's said to be either. I mean, there's probably two sides to it, but the world is gray. Yeah.
There's a big debate going on in the county right now about marijuana growing. It's a real, there's a lot of friction going on, lawsuits and all. I'm wondering if the town has any potential role in this area? Have they been approached by, and I should have asked the question first, is there any industrial land? Because one of the debates is whether to use agricultural land for this purpose when it could be industrial land, and thereby you protect the soil, because marijuana in these greenhouses is grown in pots, so it can be grown in industrial areas. The port has most of the industrial land, I believe, in the county. I may be mistaken, but does the town have any? And
the town doesn't have any that is within the confines of being too close to churches, schools, and otherwise.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, when they did the analysis, I think there was like 2 parcels of land that actually were eligible for the retail sales space that was going to open here.
Okay.
One of them was right next door to Bakery San Juan, which is looks like you have cookies right next door to the marijuana dispensary. And then the other one was down further towards like the fire station up there in Mullis. Those were the 2 areas that were far enough away that were potentially even eligible.
But that's retailing, but what about production? Is there
Same-
any,
you have the same
there's no
issues.
industrial land anybody
Not
could
that could be
approach
used.
you about, or, no? Okay,
No.
thank you.
Yes.
Mine is not related to marijuana, so don't plan on putting a store in. But one of the concerns when I come into Friday Harbor are all of the vacant businesses, you know, where people have moved out, they couldn't afford the high rents. Is there anything we can do about to help with that?
You know, I'm glad you asked that, because the answer is really absolutely not. I mean, it's a free market. And if you have a property owner that's too stupid to ask fair market value and instead wants to ask over fair market value.
And be empty for 3
or 5 years, that's their business, it's their property. But on the other hand, I go around and I talk to these people all the time about trying to get it done. My pet peeve is the one, we refer to it, I guess, as either the shoe store or the Subway, which is now under contract, signed. We'll be getting in, construction will be starting here soon, and it will be open sometime before summer, we believe.
What is it?
I'm not talking.
come on.
I am sworn to secrecy.
Marijuana?
No, it's not marijuana.
We need to get you We have the land bank, buying land and using it for various, but mainly to preserve it for open land. Could we come up with a town land bank where it was, we purchased it and used it to have starter businesses or businesses that look like something the county needs here?
I will go as far as I can with this comment, and we'll go no further. We are actively looking at properties where that might be something for the town to do.
Well,
Duncan, I design cities, and I've sat on the Historic Preservation Review Board for a number of years. It has always frustrated me that we have this wonderful, rich, walkable downtown, but we pushed all our businesses out. Brown's, the grocery store, and the context where we've encouraged us to be located is, to me, classically suburban. Bothers me. The Planning Commission has always been relatively benign, not proactive, trying to keep our town walkable. Is there a change in that philosophy?
No, the Brown property could today be built into the Brown store. They chose to move it and took it out to the other location. The town didn't chase them out of downtown, and it was a killer for the downtown.
Oh, business reacts too. So the net effect of what was going on told that business owner it was better to be out of the core.
Well,
So-
yeah, I
so
can't
that's
tell
the
you.
philosophy.
I can't tell you why people would move out of the core. I mean, that's where the people are. Sometimes you'll find cheaper land out there. If they want to expand, it's the only way they can do it.
It comes back to simple things like accessibility. And you constantly hear that. So I guess what I'm saying is the Historic Preservation Review Board working within the district, wonderful. It's great things to make Friday Harbor a unique, wonderful place to live and work. But we are growing a bit, and there seems to be this notion of that we can now live two lives. One that engages ourselves with the town of Friday Harbor, the other that means that we can come in town and get our goods and services without stepping foot into downtown. It kind of frustrates me as a philosophy of the town.
We have no control over where the business is. You know, we've got them zoned where they can put the business in. There's a place right next door to the big store that's owned by...
Sure, blame it on zoning, but zoning is the product of...
But no, I'm saying it's zoned properly. I mean, it's zoned so that those businesses could go there. They choose not to. I mean, nobody forces those businesses to go out there. We haven't chased any of them out. And there's been a lot of empty spaces where people could move back into the town if they wanted to. I mean, I literally, from the town standpoint, we can't make people go where they don't want to go. And we've never had anybody come to us saying, could you please rezone this or do this so we could move our business back in, because we seriously consider any request like that if somebody came to us. We've not been contacted by anybody since I've been here to do something like that.
Well, I know it's a perspective that's gained by having observed this happen in many other cities, is eventually the tourist portion of the city becomes t-shirts and restaurants, and the part of the city that serves the needs of the community becomes somewhat remote from what was traditionally the core of the town. It's just it's a shame to witness that happen.
Yeah, there's as far as no one is chasing out other businesses that would want to. There's lots of space in downtown available right now for other types of businesses that would serve the local people. It's just not being picked up. And if it's because they've raised their rates beyond where there's really fair market value, I can't make them change that. And one of my goals here is that when this city is said and done, is that I don't want it to be Martha's Vineyard, where the only people that live on the island are the vacationers, and there's absolutely no room for where everybody has to take the ferry in every day to go to work. That'd be bad. And so we've always tried to have a blend between the business, the tourism, but also taking care of the actual citizens that live here, so it remains a real town and not a fake town or a Disneyland.
On this,
Can I say a dirty word?
Yeah.
Parking?
yeah.
I'm sorry.
I think earlier I said that the town is actively looking at things to better the downtown area.
This parallel to the land bank that was mentioned earlier in response, you mentioned it, I think, or somebody asked a question. You said something about a land bank type entity that the town was looking at? Did I misunderstand you?
No, we're not. We're just talking about purchasing property.
Okay, but with regard to the land bank sales tax, it supports, the REIT that supports the land bank, that's not just paid by people buying property out in the county, it's also paid by people who buy property in Friday Harbor. So some of that money, or some fair share of that, should be recycled into the town by the land bank.
Not the way the ordinance is written.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, in concept they should be. I'm just wondering, does the town feel like the land bank is recycling sufficiently that money, whether it's required by ordinance or not? Is there a role, maybe an increased role the land bank could play in town?
From my standpoint, when I want to go out and play in nature, I go out in the county. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting my benefit from it. As a town resident, and I am a town resident, I go out into the county and I use and all those benefits. I think that if you have to have one entity deciding on where to buy property and what to do with it, and how to manage it and maintain it over time, we really don't have the time as a town entity. And as far as controlling it goes, I trust the individuals that are running that organization have not only the county residents' best interest in mind, but mine as a town resident. And if you don't feel that way, then I guess that's a political issue to take up with them, but I don't have a personal issue with how they do it.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we've got time for one more question and then some wrap-up remarks from Duncan. So if there's one more question.
Is it mine? It's more of a comment. The land bank has spent money in town and for the benefit of the town. They bought part of the watershed of Trout Lake, so that's now protected. There was that little place that could have been ruined. They gave a couple $100,000 to the museum, the historical museum, so they were able to make will make it more stable. And they did try to help with the farmer's market, but were turned down, unfortunately. This was before Duncan moved here. But they have done things very specifically to benefit.
And there's a
Grab one more real quick, yeah.
I'd like your comments on the new Immigrations and Customs facility on Spring Street. It's coming in.
Personally, my professional one is, no comment. My personal feeling is, like I said, they were there, they moved 2 blocks to there. This is not a nice situation, we're not talking about immigration. I don't have any concerns. I work with those people pretty regularly on issues around the port and otherwise. I think that when they're finished up and operating, would I like that building to be entirely retail? Probably. But on the other hand, it was the best spot for them, they felt, and I'm not really going to jump into their ideas to figure out whether they're right or wrong. It was their call. But they've always been good neighbors for us, and so I've got no problem. Professionally, I don't know how the council and mayor feel about it all the time. I understand there's 2 sides to the issue, but
it might detract from.
I don't see it detracting from what we do in any way. I'm just sad that it's not retail available for retail or something that's more, more that will be utilized by the citizens and tourists more for purchases or business or clothing or something like that. I would have preferred to have had that there, but they felt it was the best one for them. Wrap it up. Okay. Thank you for your time on this one. The only thing I wanted to say in closing was that we have, probably my biggest concern is this jobs and the missing generation that has occurred. We have, 18 to 35 years old. There's huge gaps missing in this community. They've gone away because there's not jobs back here again. And again, it's not the stew that makes up the community. It's very difficult to figure out how to build it. And my biggest concern is I want to bring back the jobs, and I'd like to have the younger families be able to move back here, have a living wage job, and keep the community as a real active living community. And if people want to come visit us, that's great, but I don't want to turn it into a visitor center. So right now, jobs and filling that missing generation gap are really the 2 biggest things I'd like to see completed, because I think that from that would spin off a lot of other really good things. Anyway, thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you all for being a wonderful participatory audience. 2 things. The March 9th meeting of the League membership, which I spoke of earlier, the update meeting, will be here in this same location from noon to 2 on Monday, the 9th of March. And the last thing I would like to say is those of you who are willing, we could use some help putting this room back to the way it should be. So anybody who's willing to help us move chairs and tables, we would be most grateful. Thank you for coming. Bye.